What if I told you that the reason you aren't living your dream life right now has, like, absolutely nothing to do with your talent?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right. Like, what if your skills, your intelligence, your network, what if none of that is the actual bottleneck holding you back? What if the simple, unvarnished truth is just that, well, you aren't aiming high enough?
I mean, it's a genuinely provocative thought. We spend so much time analyzing our deficiencies, trying to upskill or endlessly searching for the perfect life hack or like productivity tool. Yeah, the endless search for the ultimate routine. Exactly. But we rarely pause to consider that the foundational error in our life strategy might just be the scale of our ambition.
And that question is really the perfect launch pad for our deep dive today. We're exploring the core concepts from Grant Cardone's The 10X Rule. And the premise we're looking at is simultaneously incredibly simple and entirely overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely overwhelming.
Right. Because the fundamental idea is that you need to take your current capabilities, your current goals, and you literally just multiply them by 10. You dream 10 times bigger, and you put in 10 times the effort.
It's a complete recalibration of what you think is possible.
Right.
And what you believe is actually required of you. It shifts you out of this linear mindset where you expect incremental growth and forces you into an exponential mindset.
Well, let's really unpack the mechanics of this, because my immediate reaction, and I imagine the reaction of almost anyone listening to this, is that this sounds completely counterintuitive.
Sure.
It feels like taking someone who just wants to, jog around their neighborhood block a couple of times a week to stay healthy,
Right.
and telling them, no, to succeed, you actually need to start training for a 100-mile ultra marathon. On a biological level, it just sounds exhausting. Like, why would anyone willingly subject themselves to that kind of friction?
Because that exact friction is actually by design. To understand why this extreme approach yields results, we have to look at the raw mathematics of ambition. We have to examine how we traditionally set goals versus the actual action required to achieve them.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the 10X framework argues that our standard internal math is fundamentally flawed. Basically, humans suffer from a severe optimism bias when it comes to effort, but a pessimism bias when it comes to capability.
So we overestimate how easy things will be, but underestimate what we can actually pull off if we're pushed.
Precisely. We are terrible at estimating the resistance the world is going to throw at us. The framework suggests that you have to set goals that actually scare you a little bit. Because if your goals don't provoke a visceral nervous reaction, they are simply too small to force any real behavioral change.
Let's ground this in some practical math then. Give me a concrete example of how this 10x calculation actually plays out.
Money is always a very clear metric for this. Let's say you set a goal to save or earn an extra $10,000 this year. To the rational brain, that is a safe, reasonable goal. You calculate that you need to save a few $100s a month. But what happens when you inevitably hit a snag? You get sick, your car breaks down, the market shifts, and you lose momentum.
Right.
So you end up falling short and hitting, say, $5,000.
Which triggers a psychological defeat. You feel like you failed, so you're likely to just abandon the budgeting entirely.
Exactly. The alternative is applying the 10x multiplier. Instead of $10,000, your goal becomes $100,000. Now the entire paradigm shifts.
Because you can't just skip a few lattes to reach 100 grand.
Right. You can't just clip coupons. It forces you out of a saving mindset and into a creation mindset. You have to start a new business, invent something, or drastically elevate your value at work. It requires a completely different mechanism of action.
I see.
So let's say you fail at that massive goal. You completely miss the $100,000 mark.
Yeah.
But because you are operating with a 10x engine, pulling all these massive levers, you end up hitting $70,000.
Oh, wow. The math there is undeniable. I mean, you still technically failed to reach the stated goal, but your failure is objectively a massive life-changing success compared to your original safe target.
Yes.
You made $70,000 instead of $5,000, all because the initial target forced you to build a better system.
That is the core mechanism. If you aim for something 10 times bigger and fall short, you are still achieving way more than you ever imagined. Like, think about a salesperson.
Okay.
If their goal is to sell 10 products in a month, they do the linear math on how many calls they need to make. But if they 10x that goal to 100 products, they can't just make a few extra calls.
They have to rethink their entire lead generation process.
Exactly. They have to hire assistants, automate outreach, push unimaginably harder. They might only sell 50 products, so they miss their 10x goal, but they've crushed their original safe target of 10.
It's forcing a bigger engine into the car. Which I guess brings us to the action side of the equation. Setting the massive goal is just the architectural blueprint, but taking massive action is actually laying the bricks.
That's a great way to put it.
And the text we're analyzing emphasizes sheer volume over perfect timing. Like if you want to start a business, an average approach is making one or two well-crafted calls a day. But the 10x mindset demands 20 calls, 30 emails, aggressive follow-ups.
Operating under the assumption that 90% of your effort will be completely ignored.
Right. It shatters the myth of the perfect moment. Massive action is about flooding the zone.
Yeah, it really is.
I really need to push back on this, though, specifically regarding the psychological toll. Let's step away from sales and talk about creative work.
Sure, let's do it.
If I want to write a book, and I set a goal to write 10 pages a day instead of 1 page a day, doesn't that just set me up for chronic disappointment? Like, if I sit down and only manage to write 4 pages, I've failed my 10x goal. Doesn't living in a constant state of falling short biologically lead straight to burnout?
Honestly, that is the most common and valid critique of high-performance frameworks like this. But the psychological mechanism at play here isn't about perfection or, like, hitting the absolute peak number every single day.
Okay, then what is it about?
It's about fundamentally shifting your baseline. By setting the goal at 10 pages, you are eliminating the possibility of stopping at 1. When you aim for 1 page, the moment things get mildly uncomfortable, your brain just gives you permission to stop.
Right, because the brain is an energy conservation machine. It wants to do the bare minimum required to survive.
Yes, exactly. So the 10x goal bypasses that evolutionary laziness. It demands such overwhelming action that your new failures become your elevated standard. You wrote 4 pages. The person aiming for 1 page stopped at 1.
I get it. You are essentially using cognitive dissonance to trick yourself into operating at a permanently higher frequency.
The massive goal is the bait, and the elevated baseline is the actual prize. But once you commit to this massive volume of action, you are going to immediately crash into 2 very tall, very solid psychological brick walls.
Let me guess. Those walls being the biological fear of failure and the sociological comfort of simply being average.
Nailed it.
Well, let's tackle fear first, because usually we treat fear as a stop sign. Our biology literally tells us, hey, your heart is racing, your cortisol is spiking, turn around and run away from whatever is causing this.
And in a state of nature, that biological response keeps you alive.
Right.
But in a modern environment, the 10x framework argues that fear is actually a compass. It's a highly specific directional signal pointing you toward exactly what is worth pursuing. The things that terrify us in a professional or personal growth setting are almost always the exact thresholds we need to cross to level up.
Like public speaking. If you are terrified of speaking in front of a crowd, but there is a major presentation opportunity at work, the typical self-preservation response is to find a clever excuse to dodge it. Let a colleague take the stage so you can stay safe in the audience.
And by staying safe, you remain completely stagnant. The 10x response is to recognize that fear and lean all the way into it. Volunteer for the presentation.
Even if your voice shakes.
Especially if your voice shakes. Because conquering that specific terrifying bottleneck might reveal a hidden talent or put you in front of the exact executives who can change your career trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Fear often precedes breakthroughs. The logic here is that if your goals aren't inducing a level of fear, you are only aiming at things you already know you can do.
So we use fear as a compass, but the second roadblock feels even heavier, honestly. The gravitational pull of just being average.
Oh, it is heavier because it is socially reinforced. Society loves average. It's predictable.
Yeah.
But the harsh truth presented in this framework is that settling for average is the quickest mathematical way to fail. In a highly competitive global economy, doing the bare minimum or even doing exactly what the middle of the pack is doing guarantees you will be commoditized and ignored.
Think about the restaurant industry. You have one restaurant that serves decent food. It's fine. It's reasonably clean. The service is adequate. They are doing everything right according to the average standard.
Right, the typical spot.
Yeah. But then you have another restaurant that goes out of its way to create an unforgettable theatrical dining experience with highly personalized service and wildly unique dishes.
And when an economic downturn hits, or a new competitor opens across the street, which of those restaurants survives?
The unique one.
Exactly. The average one has no loyal fan base to carry it through hard times.
Building on that, being average is essentially choosing to wear camouflage in a hyper-competitive world. You blend in so perfectly with the background noise of everyone else doing the bare minimum that absolutely no one notices you. You become invisible to opportunity.
I mean, that is a phenomenal metaphor. Average makes you invisible camouflage. Fear, on the other hand, is the spotlight.
Yeah.
It highlights exactly where you need to stand to break out of that camouflage, take a risk, and actually be seen.
So we have the mathematical foundation. We know we need 10x goals and massive action. We know we have to shed the camouflage of average and follow the compass of fear. But practically speaking, how do you sustain that? Because waking up and running toward what terrifies you every single day requires an absolute beast of an engine.
It does. It requires a seemingly unnatural level of stamina.
Hmm.
And the fuel for that engine comes in the form of two very intense, uncompromising concepts: obsession and duty.
I have to say, the current cultural zeitgeist is entirely focused on boundaries, quiet quitting, and work-life balance. Telling someone they need obsession sounds incredibly heavy, almost like a psychological red flag.
The author challenges that exact cultural narrative, arguing that we have inappropriately pathologized obsession. In the 10X framework, obsession isn't a disorder, it's a prerequisite for greatness.
Also,
When you are genuinely obsessed, you naturally outwork everyone else without it feeling like a sacrifice. You achieve flow states, you innovate. You find backdoor solutions to obstacles because your brain is subconsciously working on the problem even when you're sleeping.
look at Elon Musk's early days with SpaceX. His absolute obsession with Mars colonization is the only reason that company exists. Industry experts told him it was mathematically and financially impossible for a private startup to build orbital rockets.
Right, the establishment thought he was crazy.
Completely. If he was just passionate or interested in space, he would have quit after the first 3 rockets exploded. Passion quits when it gets expensive. Obsession pushes through catastrophic failure.
That's a great example. But you brought up a vital point earlier about the danger of that mindset. If obsession is purely self-serving, it does lead to burnout, broken relationships, and isolation.
Yeah, the dark side of ambition.
Exactly. And that is where the concept of duty must be introduced as the stabilizing force. The framework states that you cannot view success as merely an optional, nice-to-have lifestyle upgrade. You must reframe success as an ethical duty
Wait, an ethical duty to whom?
to your family, your community, your employees, and your future self. Consider a small, independent bakery owner. If that owner views success merely as a personal option, they might bake just enough bread to pay their own rent and keep the lights on. They do the minimum to survive because they're only thinking of their immediate comfort.
But if they shift that perspective and view reaching their ultimate potential as a duty,
The entire operational model changes. They realize that their financial success means they can provide health insurance for local staffs. They can expand and revitalize a dying Main Street. They can generate wealth to put their children through college without debt.
oh wow.
Right. When you pair obsession with duty, the drive shifts from being an egocentric pursuit into a profound responsibility to lift up the people depending on you.
That drastically changes the neurochemistry of the effort. It's no longer about grinding for your own ego, which is exhausting. It's about operating from a place of service, which is a renewable energy source.
Yes. It creates a resilience that simple ambition cannot match.
So you have this roaring 10x engine. You are obsessed, driven by a profound sense of duty, taking massive action, and intentionally seeking out the spotlight of fear. You are a force of nature. But the world doesn't typically love a force of nature. When you disrupt the status quo, the world tends to push back hard.
It absolutely does. Operating at a 10x volume guarantees you will create massive friction. You will disrupt markets. You will inadvertently step on toes, and you will attract fierce criticism. Sustaining your trajectory depends entirely on how you interpret and metabolize that external blowback.
Let's talk about the criticism aspect first, because human beings are deeply social creatures. We are biologically wired to crave tribal approval. But the framework suggests we should actively welcome criticism as proof we're on the right path.
Think of it as a basic law of physics and personal development. Impact invites critique. If nobody is criticizing what you're doing, it is a mathematical certainty that you aren't doing anything disruptive enough to matter. Criticism is just the friction of your momentum rubbing against the stationary world.
It makes me think of a musician trying to invent a completely new genre of music. At first, the purists and the critics are going to tear them apart. They'll mock it because it breaks their established rules of what good music sounds like.
Always.
But over time, that exact abrasive, weird style is what captures a new generation and sets a massive cultural trend. The initial wave of hatred was just the first empirical data point proving they'd created something truly unprecedented.
Exactly. Criticism confirms that your camouflage is gone. People attack what threatens their own choices to remain average. But surviving the fallout requires an even more radical internal shift, the adoption of extreme, total ownership over every outcome in your life. No excuses, no passing the blame to the economy, to your boss, or to bad luck.
Okay, hold on. This is where high performance advice often loses me, and I want to challenge the practicality of this.
Sure, go for it.
Let's say I leave 45 minutes early for a crucial client meeting. I am doing everything right. While I'm on the byway, a massive water main breaks ahead of me, causing total gridlock. It is completely unpredictable and physically impossible for me to move my car. I missed the meeting. How on earth is that practically my fault? How is taking ownership of bursting municipal infrastructure helpful to my psyche?
It's the ultimate stress test of the philosophy, isn't it? The crucial distinction to understand here is the psychological concept of the locus of control. Taking responsibility in a 10x framework is not about accepting moral blame for the universe's chaos. It is about actively refusing to surrender your agency.
Okay, explain that.
Well, if you have an external locus of control, you blame the traffic. You validate yourself by saying, it wasn't my fault.
Which feels good in the moment. It protects the ego.
But the moment you do that, you place the power over your professional schedule into the hands of city infrastructure. You adopt a victim mindset. Your brain stops looking for solutions because it believes it has no power. If you apply an internal locus of control, you force your brain to find the tiny variables you actually could have controlled.
Such as?
Maybe you could have checked the real-time traffic app 5 minutes before walking out the door instead of assuming the route was clear. Maybe you should have scheduled a contingency buffer, setting up your car's Bluetooth so you could dial into the meeting dynamically if delayed. Maybe scheduling a high-stakes in-person meeting during peak transit hours was a strategic error from the start.
I see the pivot. By aggressively hunting down the tiny sliver of the disaster that you could control, you extract actionable data. You empower yourself to build a more robust system for tomorrow, rather than just shrugging your shoulders and accepting that you are at the mercy of random chance.
Exactly. It transmutes a frustrating failure into strategic armor.
All right, this has been an incredible philosophical deconstruction, but philosophy without application is just entertainment. Let's bring this down to earth. How do you actually execute this on a random Tuesday morning? We can't just operate in the theoretical. We need the daily blueprint.
The daily execution is where the neuroplasticity actually happens. It requires building habits that constantly reinforce the exponential mindset. The first step happens the moment you wake up. You must write down your massive goals, and not type them on a phone, but physically write them out.
If I'm trying to implement this tomorrow, writing down my goals seems like an easy first step, but isn't that just a glorified vision board? What's the actual mechanism making that work?
It engages your reticular activating system, or the RAS. Your RAS is the bundle of nerves at our brainstem that filters out unnecessary information so you don't get overwhelmed. By physically writing your 10x goals every morning.
And again, every night, right?
Yes, and again every night. You are manually programming that filter. You are telling your brain, this is the most important data in my world. As you go through your Tuesday, your brain will subconsciously highlight conversations, articles, and opportunities that align with that goal, things you would have otherwise ignored.
You're hacking your own attention span. So once the goals are written, we move to the physical action.
The immediate mandate is to consciously double whatever effort you originally planned for the day. If you plan to spend an hour prospecting for your side hustle, you force yourself to sit there for 2 hours. You intentionally habituate yourself to the friction of going beyond the stopping point.
And what about the compass of fear? Are we supposed to do something terrifying every single day?
Yes, but in scalable doses.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be skydiving. If you are terrified of confrontation, your daily act of fear might just be sending an email asking for a raise or speaking up with a dissenting opinion in a small team meeting. You must train your nervous system that walking into discomfort yields positive results rather than death.
It's exposure therapy for ambition. And how do we structure our time to ensure all of this actually gets done?
You start treating your personal goals as uncancelable appointments. Most people will bend over backward, skip lunch, and endure massive stress to make sure they aren't late for a meeting with their boss.
Oh, absolutely.
But they will instantly cancel a workout or a study session the moment they feel a little tired. The 10x mindset requires you to recognize the cognitive dissonance of valuing your employer's time more than your own life's trajectory. You do not break meetings with your future self.
That naturally leads to fighting the camouflage of average. How does this framework suggest we battle the desire to just be normal in our downtime?
It demands that you stop settling for good enough in the mundane aspects of life. Because neurobiology doesn't compartmentalize. You cannot practice relentless excellence at the office for 8 hours and then joyfully accept mediocrity the minute you walk in your front door. How you do anything eventually becomes how you do everything.
So this isn't just a corporate business strategy. If you usually make the same boring, repetitive meal for dinner because it's easy, you push yourself to learn a complex new recipe. You elevate the baseline of a random Tuesday night. It is a holistic life strategy. You are 10xing your career, but you're also 10xing your Tuesday night dinner, your relationships, your health.
Spot on. And the final step of the blueprint anchors all of this before you sleep. You reflect on the day. You examine your setbacks, hunt down your locus of control to own them completely, and you consciously take any criticism or doubt you receive that day and mentally convert it into the aggressive fuel you will use to wake up and do it all again tomorrow.
It is an incredibly demanding system. Let's synthesize all of this for you. If you want to break out of the life you have and actually build the reality you are dreaming of, you have to fundamentally change the math of your existence. You need to think massively bigger to force innovation. You must act with overwhelming volume, refusing to wear the comfortable camouflage of average. You have to let your biological fears act as a compass pointing toward growth while taking extreme total ownership over every single variable in your life.
It is a radical departure from the standard operating procedure of society. But ordinary actions only yield ordinary results. And analyzing this framework brings up a truly fascinating psychological paradox to consider as you move forward.
What's the final thought?
The mathematical guarantee of the 10x rule is that by aiming 10 times higher, you will achieve far more than your original linear plan, even when you fall short. But think about the neurological implications of that. If you are constantly aiming for 10x and you're continually landing at 6x or 7x, well, you're technically living your entire life in a permanent conscious state of falling short of your stated objectives.
Right.
How does living in that constant deficit permanently reshape your brain's definition of what a failure actually is? If failing at 10x means you are wildly, objectively successful by every normal societal standard, does the concept of failure eventually just evaporate from your psychology? Does failure just become an aggressive, high-octane synonym for growth?
That is a phenomenal paradigm shift to chew on. So tomorrow morning, when you wake up and look at the goals for your life, you have a choice to make. Are you going to keep lacing up your shoes for that safe little jog around the block? Or are you finally ready to start training for the ultramarathon?